The moon hung low over the ancient city of Baghdad, its silver light spilling over the narrow alleys and bustling marketplaces now silent under the weight of night. In one of these alleys, nestled between a crumbling wall and a cart long abandoned, a boy no older than 10 lay curled against the chill. His name was Eamon, and though the world around him teemed with life during the day, his life felt desperately empty. The faint rustle of a rat scurrying past stirred him awake. Eamon sat up, rubbing his eyes and pulling his thin, tattered cloak tighter around him. Sleep was a fleeting luxury, often interrupted by hunger or the fear of being discovered by those who prowled the streets looking for someone weaker to prey upon. He ran his fingers over the small copper pendant hanging around his neck, a reminder of a time when life had been different, a time when he wasn't alone. The pendant was all he had left of his parents, whose faces had begun to fade in his memory. His father's laugh, his mother's soft touch, these were no longer vivid recollections but faint echoes in a boy's heart that yearned for the warmth of family. He didn't even know why he still carried the pendant. Perhaps it was hope, though hope had little place in the life of a street orphan. As the city began to stir, Eamon rose from his makeshift bed, his stomach growling insistently. The bazaars would soon be alive with merchants shouting their wares, and if he was quick, he might find scraps before the dogs got to them. He moved through the city with practiced ease, slipping through crowds unnoticed, his keen eyes scanning for any sign of discarded food. This morning, luck was not on his side. Eamon searched one alley after another, finding nothing but refuse. His hunger gnawed at him, and his frustration grew. He paused at the edge of the Grand Bazaar, where the scent of fresh bread wafted from a baker's stall. His mouth watered, but he knew better than to steal. The last time he tried, he had been caught, and the baker's strong hands had left bruises that lingered for days. "Maybe today will be different," he whispered to himself, clutching the pendant as though it held some magical power to change his fate. His feet carried him toward the far end of the bazaar, where fewer merchants set up shop. Here, an old man sat on a worn rug, his back straight despite his years. He had no wares to sell, only a small lantern flickering beside him. Eamon's curiosity was piqued. The man didn't call out to passers-by or beg for alms like others in the area. Instead, he sat quietly, his eyes scanning the crowd as though searching for someone. When the man's gaze settled on Eamon, it was as if time stood still. His eyes, deep and dark, like wells that held the secrets of the world, seemed to pierce through the boy's very soul. Eamon froze, unsure whether to approach or flee. "You have questions," the old man said, his voice soft but carrying an authority that compelled Eamon to listen. Eamon hesitated, his fingers tightening around the pendant. He didn't know what to say. He wasn't even sure what he was feeling. "I don't know you," he finally managed. "And yet, here you are," the man replied with a faint smile. He gestured for Eamon to sit. Something in the man's demeanor made Eamon obey, though he remained wary. The two sat in silence for a moment, the bustling noise of the bazaar fading into the background. "Why do you carry that pendant?" the man asked, nodding toward Eamon's neck. "It was my father's," Eamon said. "It's all I have left of him." The old man's eyes softened. "Then it is precious, not because of its value, but because of the meaning you give it." Eamon nodded, unsure where this conversation was leading. He felt a strange comfort in the man's presence, though he couldn't explain why. "What is it you seek, boy?" the man asked. Eamon hesitated again. The answer was obvious: food, a home, a family, but saying it out loud felt too vulnerable. "I just want to survive," he said instead, his voice barely above a whisper. The man studied him for a long moment before reaching into the folds of his robe. He pulled out a small wooden box, intricately carved with patterns that seemed to shift in the light. He held it out to Eamon. "Take this," he said. "Inside is not gold, but something far more valuable. When the time is right, you'll understand its worth." Eamon stared at the box, unsure whether to accept it. Was this some kind of trick? But the man's eyes held no malice, only a quiet sincerity. Reluctantly, Eamon took the box, its weight surprising him. "Thank you," he said, though he wasn't sure what he was thanking the man for. The old man smiled again, a mysterious smile that seemed to hold 1,000 stories. "May your journey lead you to where you're meant to be." Before Eamon could respond, the man rose and disappeared into the crowd, leaving the boy alone with the strange box. He turned it over in his hands, examining the carvings. They seemed to form symbols he couldn't decipher, and the lid was sealed tightly. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, Eamon found a quiet corner and sat down to open the box. His fingers pried at the lid until it finally gave way with a soft creak. Inside was a single parchment, rolled and tied with a delicate golden thread. He unrolled it carefully, revealing a message written in elegant script. "True wealth lies not in gold but in the hearts of others." The words puzzled him. What did they mean? He had hoped for food or coins, something that could solve his immediate problems. Instead, he was left with a riddle. Frustrated, Eamon stuffed the parchment back into the box and tucked it into his cloak. Perhaps the man was just a fool, or perhaps the words were meant to mock him. Either way, they wouldn't fill his stomach. But as he wandered through the city that day, the words lingered in his mind, refusing to be ignored. True wealth lies not in gold but in the hearts of others. What kind of wealth could be found in people's hearts? Eamon didn't know, but part of him, a small, hopeful part, wanted to find out. The days passed slowly, and Eamon carried the mysterious box wherever he went. The old man's words and the message inside the box remained a puzzle that refused to leave his thoughts. Each night, as he lay beneath the stars, he would pull the box from his cloak, run his fingers over the intricate carvings, and wonder about the meaning behind the cryptic phrase. One evening, while Eamon searched for scraps near the edges of the bazaar, he stumbled upon a small shop. Its wooden sign was faded, the lettering barely legible, but the warm glow of lanterns inside beckoned him. The scent of dried spices and incense wafted through the air, mingling with the faint aroma of something sweet. Curiosity tugged at him, and he peered through the open doorway. Inside, shelves lined with jars and trinkets seemed to stretch endlessly. Behind the counter stood a man with a weathered face and kind eyes. His name was Laith, though Eamon wouldn't learn that until later. At that moment, all he noticed was the man's welcoming smile. "Looking for something, young one?" Laith asked, his voice as warm as the light in the shop. Eamon hesitated, unsure of how to respond. He wasn't looking for anything in particular, just a chance to fill his aching stomach. "I'm not stealing, I swear," he said quickly, his hand instinctively clutching the box hidden in his cloak. Laith chuckled softly. "I didn't say you were. But you look like you could use a meal." Eamon's stomach growled loudly, betraying his hunger. Embarrassed, he looked down at his feet. "I don't have any money," he mumbled. "Money isn't always needed," Laith replied. He disappeared into a back room and returned moments later with a small loaf of bread and a bowl of lentil stew. He placed them on the counter and gestured for Eamon to eat. The boy hesitated. Kindness was a rarity in his world, and he didn't know how to trust it. But hunger won out, and he approached the counter, his movements cautious. The first bite of bread brought tears to his eyes. It was soft, fresh, and unlike anything he'd tasted in weeks. Laith watched silently as Eamon ate, his expression thoughtful. When the boy had finished, he spoke again. "What's your name, lad?" "Eamon," he said, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. "Well, Eamon, how would you like to earn an honest meal every day?" Laith asked. "I could use an extra pair of hands around here. It's nothing fancy, sweeping floors, organizing shelves, but it's work." The offer caught Eamon off guard. He hadn't expected generosity, much less an opportunity. He nodded slowly, hope flickering in his chest. "I'd like that." The days turned into weeks, and Eamon quickly became an indispensable part of the shop. Laith was patient and kind, teaching him not only how to organize the goods but also the art of dealing with customers. Eamon marveled at how Laith treated everyone who entered the shop, whether they were wealthy merchants or humble farmers. He greeted them all with the same warmth and respect. One evening, after the shop had closed and the streets were quiet, Eamon mustered the courage to show Laith the wooden box. He placed it on the counter and explained how it had come into his possession. Laith examined the box carefully, his fingers tracing the carvings. "This is a fine piece of craftsmanship," he said. "But it's the message inside that matters most." "What does it mean?" Eamon asked, his voice tinged with frustration. "I've thought about it every day, but I still don't understand." Laith smiled. "It's not an answer you'll find in a single moment, Eamon. It's something you'll discover over time. True wealth isn't just about gold or possessions. It's about the connections you make and the good you bring into the lives of others." Eamon frowned. "But I don't have anything to give." "You've already given more than you realize," Laith said gently. "Your hard work here helps me, and your kindness to the customers brightens their days. Sometimes, wealth is as simple as a smile or a helping hand." As Eamon grew older, he began to understand Laith's words. He saw how small acts of kindness could ripple outward, touching the lives of others in ways he hadn't imagined. He started offering to help customers carry their goods or gave advice on how to use the spices and herbs they bought. People began to notice the boy with the quick smile and the kind eyes, and word spread about the shop where everyone was treated like family. But life in Baghdad was not without its challenges. A severe drought struck the region, leaving many families struggling to survive. Crops failed, and food became scarce. One day, as Eamon and Laith surveyed their dwindling stock, the boy spoke up. "We have to do something," Eamon said, his voice firm. "There are people out there who won't make it through this drought if we don't help." Laith looked at him, pride shining in his eyes. "What do you suggest?" Eamon thought for a moment. "We can use what we have to buy grain in bulk and sell it at a price people can afford. Maybe we can even give some away to those who need it most." It was a risky plan, one that could leave them with nothing if it didn't work. But Laith trusted Eamon's judgment, and together they pooled their savings to purchase as much grain as they could. They filled the shop with sacks of wheat and barley, selling it at a fraction of the market price. For the poorest families, they gave it away freely. The decision changed everything. The people of Baghdad, grateful for their generosity, began to flock to the shop not just for goods but for guidance and support. Eamon's reputation grew, and with it came new opportunities. Merchants from neighboring cities sought him out, offering partnerships that allowed the business to thrive. Through it all, Eamon kept the wooden box close, its message now etched in his heart. He had discovered the truth within its words, not through gold or riches, but through the bonds he had formed and the lives he had touched. And so, the orphan boy who had once wandered the streets with nothing but a pendant and a faint glimmer of hope became a symbol of resilience and compassion, known throughout Baghdad as the Orphan King who ruled not with power, but with love. As the years passed, Eamon's life transformed in ways he could never have imagined. What had started as a small act of kindness, a meal offered by Laith on a quiet evening, became the foundation of a life filled with purpose and meaning. The shop, once a modest corner of the bazaar, grew into a thriving enterprise. But more than its success in trade, it became a place where people came not just to buy goods, but to seek advice, share stories, and find comfort. Eamon, now in his early 20s, had become a figure of quiet authority in the community. His sharp mind and warm heart endeared him to all, from merchants seeking guidance on business matters to mothers asking for help with their children. Yet, despite his growing reputation, Eamon remained humble, always remembering the streets where he had begun. One morning, as he prepared to open the shop, Eamon noticed a young girl standing hesitantly by the doorway. She couldn't have been older than 10, her thin frame wrapped in a threadbare shawl. Her eyes darted nervously, as if deciding whether to approach. "Good morning," Eamon said gently, stepping outside. "Are you looking for something?" The girl flinched, startled by his voice, but she didn't run. Instead, she looked down at her bare feet and whispered, "I'm hungry." Eamon's heart clenched. He saw himself in her, lost, hungry, and afraid to trust. Without a word, he guided her inside and handed her a piece of bread and a small bowl of dates. She ate quickly, as though the food might disappear if she didn't finish it fast enough. "What's your name?" Eamon asked when she had finished. "Nura," she replied softly. "Do you have a family, Nura?" he asked, though he already suspected the answer. She shook her head. "They're gone." Eamon nodded, understanding her pain without needing further explanation. He knelt to her level, his eyes kind but serious. "You're welcome here, Nura. If you're willing to work hard, I can give you a place to stay and food to eat. What do you say?" Her eyes widened in disbelief, but she nodded quickly. "I'll work hard. I promise." Over time, Nura became a part of the shop's family. Eamon taught her the skills he had learned from Laith, how to arrange goods, speak to customers, and treat everyone with respect. She was a quick learner, and her laughter soon filled the shop, bringing a lightness that warmed everyone who walked through the door. Eamon's decision to take Nura in didn't go unnoticed. The people of Baghdad marveled at his generosity, and many began to follow his example, opening their homes to orphans and helping those in need. What had started as one act of kindness grew into a movement that spread across the city, transforming it into a place where neighbors looked out for one another. One evening, as Eamon sat by the counter, he pulled out the wooden box that had been his companion for so many years. The parchment inside was worn, the edges frayed from being unrolled and reread countless times. He traced the words with his finger. True wealth lies not in gold but in the hearts of others. It was a message he now understood deeply. His life had been enriched not by the coins he had earned or the goods he had traded, but by the connections he had made. Latha's wisdom, Nura's laughter, the gratitude of those he had helped, these were the treasures that filled his heart. As he sat lost in thought, Lath entered the shop, his steps slower than they had once been, but his spirit as strong as ever. "You're thinking about that old box again, aren't you?" he said with a chuckle. Eamon smiled. "I can't help it. It's what started everything." Lath placed a hand on Eamon's shoulder. "You've done well, my boy. Better than I ever imagined. But remember, the journey doesn't end here. There are always more people to help, more hearts to touch." Eamon nodded, his resolve strengthening. He knew Lath was right. Though he had achieved much, there was still more to do. He had been given a chance when he had nothing, and now it was his turn to ensure that others had the same opportunity. The drought that had once plagued Baghdad eventually passed, but Eamon's legacy of kindness and compassion remained. He began to use his wealth to fund projects that improved the lives of the city's poorest residents, building wells in neighborhoods without water, providing education for children who would otherwise have none, and creating shelters for those without homes. One day, as he walked through the bustling bazaar, he felt a tug on his cloak. Turning, he found an old man sitting on a rug, his back straight despite his years. It was the same man who had given him the wooden box all those years ago. Eamon knelt before him, his heart swelling with gratitude. "It's you," he said, his voice trembling. "I've been searching for you." The old man smiled, his eyes as sharp and knowing as ever. "Have you found what you were looking for?" Eamon nodded, his hands trembling as he held the pendant around his neck. "I have." "You were right. True wealth isn't in gold or riches. It's in the lives we touch and the love we share." The old man's smile widened. "You've learned well, Eamon. And now, it's your turn to teach others." Before Eamon could reply, the old man rose and disappeared into the crowd, leaving behind only the faint scent of incense. Eamon stood there for a long time, the wooden box tucked securely under his arm and a renewed sense of purpose in his heart. In the years that followed, Eamon's name became synonymous with hope and generosity. People traveled from distant lands to meet the orphan king of Baghdad, whose wealth was measured not in gold but in the countless lives he had transformed. And though Eamon's journey had begun in poverty, it was his riches of spirit that made him truly great, a legacy that would inspire generations to come. The years rolled by like the gentle flow of the Tigris River, carrying with them the legacy of Eamon's deeds. The city of Baghdad, once plagued by the disparity of wealth and suffering, had transformed into a thriving hub of compassion and opportunity, thanks in no small part to the work of Eamon and those he inspired. His shop had become more than a place of commerce. It was a sanctuary for the weary, a beacon of hope for the hopeless, and a wellspring of kindness for all who entered. But even as Eamon's influence grew, he remained humble, content to walk among the people as one of them. He refused to live in grandeur, choosing instead to keep his modest home near the bustling bazaar, where he could hear the laughter of children, the chatter of merchants, and the vibrant pulse of life that filled the city he loved. One crisp morning, Eamon stood on the balcony of his home, watching the first rays of sunlight illuminate the golden domes and bustling streets of Baghdad. He sipped his tea thoughtfully, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. Yet, there was a lingering question in his heart, one that had grown stronger with each passing year. The wooden box that had guided him through so much of his journey still sat on his bedside table, its message etched in his soul. True wealth lies not in gold but in the hearts of others. He had lived by these words, but he wondered if there was more to discover. Was there something else he was meant to do? That day, Eamon resolved to visit Lath, the man who had first taken him in and taught him the value of kindness and integrity. Though age had slowed Latha's steps, his wisdom remained as sharp as ever, and his counsel had always been a source of guidance for Eamon. Lath greeted Eamon with a warm smile, his hand steady as he poured tea into delicate cups. "It's been a while, my boy," he said, his voice rich with affection. What brings you to my humble home today? Eamon hesitated for a moment, then spoke. I've been thinking about the message in the wooden box. It's guided my life, shaped my choices, and brought me so much joy. But I feel there's something more, something I haven't yet understood. Laith nodded, his eyes twinkling with understanding. The wisdom in that box is like a seed, Eamon. It grows with you, revealing new truths as you continue your journey. Perhaps it's time to seek a new horizon. Eamon frowned slightly. What do you mean? You've given much to Baghdad, and your work here has created ripples of change, Laith said. But the world is vast, and there are others who need what you have to offer. Maybe it's time to step beyond the walls of this city and share your light with those who dwell in the shadows. The idea took root in Eamon's heart. Over the following weeks, he began to prepare for a journey that would take him beyond Baghdad. He entrusted the shop to Nura, who had grown into a capable young woman, her quick wit and kind spirit making her beloved by the people. You've been like a sister to me, Nura, Eamon told her as they stood in the shop one evening. This place is as much yours as it is mine. Take care of it, and take care of our people. Nura blinked back tears but nodded firmly. I won't let you down. With that, Eamon set out on his journey. He traveled through bustling cities and quiet villages, deserts that stretched endlessly beneath the sky, and mountains that touched the clouds. Everywhere he went, he sought out those in need, offering not just material aid but the wisdom he had gathered over the years. In a small village nestled in the mountains, he met a widow struggling to raise her 3 children. Eamon helped her establish a small weaving business, teaching her how to trade her goods in the nearby markets. In a desert caravanserai, he befriended a group of travelers who shared tales of hardship, offering them guidance and connecting them with opportunities to rebuild their lives. Years passed, and Eamon's reputation spread far and wide. He became a symbol of hope, a living embodiment of the truth that wealth was not in gold but in the bonds between people. Yet, despite his growing fame, Eamon always remained humble, deflecting praise and reminding those he helped that they, too, had the power to change their lives and the lives of others. But even as he traveled, Eamon's heart often turned back to Baghdad. He missed the familiar streets, the scent of spices in the bazaar, and the laughter of children playing near the shop. One evening, as he camped beneath a sky full of stars, he felt a deep yearning to return home. When Eamon finally returned to Baghdad, he was overwhelmed by the changes he saw. The city had flourished in his absence, its people thriving as they built on the foundation of kindness and compassion he had laid. The shop, under Nura's care, had become a hub for community projects, offering education, training, and support to those in need. As he walked through the streets, people stopped to greet him, their faces lighting up with joy. Children ran to him, their laughter filling the air, and elders blessed him with words of gratitude. Eamon's heart swelled with pride, not for himself, but for the city that had embraced his vision and made it their own. That evening, Eamon stood before the shop, watching as Nura distributed food to a group of hungry children. When she saw him, her face broke into a wide smile, and she ran to embrace him. "You're back," she exclaimed, her voice thick with emotion. "I'm back," Eamon said, his own eyes glistening with tears. "And I see you've done wonders here." Nura laughed. "I only followed your example." As the years turned into decades, Eamon continued to work quietly, mentoring the next generation of leaders and ensuring that the values of compassion and generosity remained at the heart of Baghdad. When the time came for him to step back from his work, he did so with the peace of knowing that the city was in good hands. On the day of his passing, the streets of Baghdad were filled with people mourning the loss of the man they had come to know as their orphan king. But even in their sorrow, there was a deep sense of gratitude and hope, for Eamon had left behind more than memories. He had left a legacy of love, compassion, and unwavering belief in the power of human connection. And so, the story of Eamon, the orphan king of Baghdad, became a tale passed down through generations, a timeless reminder that true wealth lies not in gold but in the hearts of others, and that even the smallest acts of kindness can transform the world.